Yeah, thank you for the introduction, certainly. Obviously, I've been generously allowed some time to speak at this event, but, where to begin? I suppose one way to begin is by saying a feeling and then using the rest of my time to articulate those feelings. The phrase that I want to think about and ramble on for a time is, may you live in interesting times. I wonder how proud the individual was who originally crafted that fine little curse, this vague, benign phrase that damns with a smile. Think about what people have seen since the turn of the millennium, conflicts that have started before many of us were born, made pointless the moment they've ended, ceaseless climate disasters after 100-year storms that crop up every few years now, not to mention the crumbling infrastructure neglected despite the unanimous support towards its repair. A contagion that has derailed so many of us from the planned courses of our lives, if the disease hasn't ended your story entirely. Shifting sands of ideology and rhetoric are made ever more vile as each passing fad is consumed by the next distraction or discourse, the latest thing to devote our time to fighting. Think about the reason why this charity is even happening. How powerful people seem to callously fiddle with the lives of the weaker, who they will never meet, for virtues that they would realize the folly of, if only they, experience their consequences. Does this make you angry? Does this make you upset, these thoughts? They should. Anger is an emotion that I've tangled with all my life. So often I am told, I understand your frustration, I understand your anger, followed by a however or a but, as if it was a mistake for one to read into the situation correctly, to point out the unfairness and be unwilling to silently sit there and watch it happen, because that wouldn't be complacent. It makes me wonder how you're supposed to deal with our interesting times, so often euphemized as being uncertain. When do the interesting things stop? Surely we've been fighting for long enough. I think about another phrase, one with multiple origins, but retains its truth no matter how you stumble upon it. It was true when the Persian poets wrote it. It was true when the words were put in the mouth of King Solomon. They were etched in Hebrew or Sanskrit or Mandarin, and indeed when retold by Edward Fitzgerald. Gazeh Ya'avor. The version I remember goes like so. One day, a noble king decided to humble his most trusted minister. He said to him, there is a certain ring I want you to bring to me. If it exists anywhere on earth, your majesty, they replied, I will bring it to you, but what makes this ring so special? It has magic powers, answered the king. If a happy man looks at it, he becomes sad. And if a sad man looks at it, he becomes happy. Of course, the king knew that no such ring existed on earth. Perhaps this fool's errand would teach the minister to choose his words better. Spring passed into summer, and still the minister did not return. More time passed, the leaves of the trees began to turn in amber, and the yearly festival was underway. But finally the minister returned to the court. Well, my friend, grinned the king, knowing the minister had failed. Have you found what I sent you after? The crowd joined the king's mirth, familiar with the trick he had pulled. However, to everyone's surprise, the minister pulled out a small gold ring and declared, here it is, your majesty. As soon as the king read the inscription, the smile vanished from his face. On the ring were inscribed three letters, Gemel, Zayin, Yud, which began the words, Gazeh Ya'avor, this too shall pass. It was in that moment that the king realized that all of his wisdom and fabulous wealth and tremendous power were but fleeting things. And just like the season cycle, there is nothing that begins that does not one day end. I do not recount that story to offend or to unsettle, but to remind and to stress. The fact of impermanence is just that, a fact. The hardships we struggle against, the cause we struggle against, one day that struggle will end. But that it does end does not mean that the struggle is not worth fighting every time in any way you can. Struggle is what reminds us that we're alive, and it's only through struggle and resistance that any positive change is made. The progress of social movements, the improvements we've made through this struggle, made in this country and across the world, do not happen overnight, over years, or even within a single lifetime. In 1943, the year my grandmother was born, segregation was still law in the land in too many states in this nation. The doctrine of separate but equal, established in the 1800s, would not be actively challenged until 1954 with Brown versus Education. In 1969, the year my father was born, a woman could not open a bank account or have a credit card in their own name in America without the consent of a spouse or a male direct relative. This was not made illegal until 1974 with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. In the 90s, when I was born, if someone had the nerve to admit to anyone that they dare love someone of the same sex, they were socially ostracized, and if they worked in the military, discharged from service. In the name of acceptance, people were obligated to pretend they weren't who they are. It was willful ignorance utilized to obfuscate the realities of people while pretending it was a service to them. Legally, this practice of don't ask, don't tell ended in 2011, but socially, we still see the remnants. These people who want to hold us down in the doom that they create, they're grasping at the last threads they have left before they end. This Texas bill, unilaterally decried by the ACLU as the breach of freedom that it is, Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, so brazenly the same thinking as Don't Ask, Don't Tell of old, or even anti-homeless architecture, something designed to make it so supposed normal, upstanding people don't have to be exposed to the reality of hundreds of thousands. It is the dying grasp of something that is ending and that will end. It always looks bleak when you have to fight, when you're told again and again that your thinking is right, but you should quiet down, to not bother, to lay down and take what the world hands to you. And every pushback or backstep that is proposed or that does pass may feel like it's not worth it. And I reject that and ask that anyone who listens to do the same. The existence of these bills, of these ways of thought, of these arguments show now more than ever that the struggle must continue. Progress is not inevitable. Stagnancy, complacency, status quo, they are the natural enemies of change. Passivity in the face of backlash will only cede ground to what we've previously fought and won, which makes it all the harder to drag back if it is lost. The actions one can take vary, stemming from what you're capable of doing. But I would argue that even if something seems awkward or uncomfortable, one should explore and challenge why that makes them uncomfortable. Struggle is uncomfortable, change and growth is painful. It is the signifier that shows that our times are interesting as they are. I want people 100 years after I am dead to look at what we are doing in our interesting times and know that we fought with every ounce of our will and refused to back down to the pendulum swinging back at progress. I want to be past our interesting times. I want them to be bored because of how content they are because of the work we did. And if we fail, there are some other words that I think about from time to time. They're the words of the last of Camelot, Ted Kennedy. They were said by a man who was defeated, the incumbent Jimmy Carter being favored, however, chose to use his time not to attack his political rival, but chose to take his opportunity to advocate for the systemic change that he believed in. It was Medicare, by the way, Medicare reform in 1980. And over time, the words he said have resonated and taken on a new meaning beyond the convention that it concluded. For all of those who cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. I hope I haven't taken up too much of your time. Please donate to what you can. And up next, enjoy something completely different with the fluting stylings of Lauren.
You know that bit in like every movie where somebody gets up on a chair and talks about how it's the darkest hour, but gives the inspiring speech that convinces everybody to get up and fight to survive? I feel like that was that. I feel like I just got that. Thank you, Justin. I want to go jump on a horse and ride into Mordor, but since I can't do that, we have this lovely donation link right down here on the bottom right, and right down in the description. And we're at $850 right now, which is amazing. Thank you. You all have been super